Are you looking for tips on how to put an offer on a house? Well, that's what we're covering today, step by step, so stay tuned. Buying a house is one of the biggest investments you will make, so it's really important that you do a thorough research process and preparation process to make the best offer and understand all the repairs and items necessary in a home. So today I'm going to guide you through 5 different steps on getting ready to make an offer so that you can be fully prepared and understand what it involves. I'm Theresa Wellman with HomeownerExperience.com, your local San Jose, California realtor. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here's an overview of the home buying process. So if you've been joining me on this series, you've already watched several videos. Today's video is on step number 4, how to make an offer on a house. So let's go ahead and walk through those 5 steps to get through that process and make sure you've done your research thoroughly. So the first step is going to be read reports. Many agents post their reports on a system called disclosures.io. It'll look something like this where you'll get all the documents involved. So there's several critical items that I want you to really take a look at. So there's reports and there's disclosures. Reports are going to be things like a natural hazard disclosure report, also an inspection report, whether it's property or termite or roof. And those detailed reports are very important. But then there's also seller disclosures. So first, let's talk about the reports. So if you look here, there is several different things. If we pull up this NHD report, that's the natural hazard disclosure. This is going to disclose where a property is located. Is it in a flood zone? Is it in a potential flood zone? Is it in a liquefaction zone or an earthquake zone? A lot of different details. So there's going to be some maps that you should look at and a checklist also. So this here shows that this property is in the light blue, an area of potential flooding if a dam were to fail. So the property is highlighted, the parcel, in red. If you continue to scroll down, this will show you any natural hazard sites, as well as here's an overview. You can quickly look, no, except for yes in the area of potential flooding. So I'm using a property on Redmond Avenue in Almaden Valley as an example today to gather the information. So that's the natural hazard report. There's also more detail about special tax zones and a lot of details in that report. It is 52 pages. So take time to go through that and go through with your agent. Another important report is, of course, going to be the home inspection. So you're going to want to look at the details of the home inspection. This home inspector's report has a summary at the top, which is very helpful. Sometimes they have that. Sometimes they highlight things. Sometimes you got to read the whole report. So this is something that you should go through also with your agent. Maybe you sit down and you have a meeting one-on-one or a Zoom call with your agent to go through the details. Another option that I do with my clients is encourage them to read and ask questions, and I will also read and give a summary, and then we'll have a discussion based on that. So whichever method works for you, it's very important to go through the details of all of these reports and start taking notes of what needs to be done. For example, in this property, there's some fascia, there's a chimney ceiling that needs to be done, it's missing GFCIs in the kitchen, and there's some electrical items that need to be addressed. So I'm going to take notes and write all of that down and start making estimates in conjunction with my agent as to what costs those are going to need to be. Now, if it's in a slower market or a buyer's market, you can ask the seller to handle those repairs so you don't need to budget. But if it's a very competitive seller's market, you're going to need to account for those costs with your offer amount. So it's important to keep record of your to-do list, if you will, of repairs that need to be addressed with the property. Now, the termite report is also really important. Termites are very common here in California, and so you're going to want to take a look at the details of the termite report. Each of these numbers here talk about an area that needs some sort of attention or has some sort of note that you should look into. So quickly, just for sake of this video, rather than going through everything, we're going to look at the very end and we're going to look at what's section 1. Section 1 is active problems that need to be addressed. This property is $2,200 worth, and section 2 about $440 worth. But you'll also note that 11E and 11F say by owner, meaning the termite company won't handle those repairs. So you've got to budget a little extra for that as well. So I'm taking notes, and I'll show you an Excel spreadsheet where I'm taking those notes so that you can get an idea of the total that we need to account for. So these are steps that you should be going through on the report. And then again on the roof inspection, look at those numbers. So that's step 1, read report. Step 2 is going to be study the disclosures. So here there are several critical areas. The first is going to be this TDS and SPQ. They are really important to understand the details that the seller is providing about their knowledge of the property. For example, obviously what's included and is the seller occupying the property, but things like how old is the roof? Where might there be exhaust fans? Maybe you didn't notice that when you walked through the property, but those are important things to know, like are they in the bathrooms or kitchens and laundry rooms? And is the seller aware of any repairs that are necessary? Maybe they're minor things that didn't come up in the home inspection, or they're things that are observable in certain weather that wasn't happening when the property inspector was there. Also, any kind of easements or things you need to be aware of about neighbors. So read all of these details. If any of these boxes say yes, you need to be sure to check the notes and make sure you understand each of those items, okay? So that is the SPQ. Then the TDS. The SPQ is a seller questionnaire that's very detailed. Again, what's going to be really important is looking at those spots that the seller has said yes, and their explanation for that so that you understand exactly what's going on there. Now, while you're doing that, maybe you have questions that come up. You can ask your agent, and if your agent does not know the answer, you're going to want to ask the seller. So that is going to be step number 3, is after you've looked at all these details, ask the seller your questions. Maybe it also means you go back and visit the property, and now that you have notes, look at those items in person to understand them better. Those are all really important. There's also details that you're going to want to know asking the seller, such as, is there a shed in the backyard and do they plan to leave it or take it? You want to accommodate anything the seller wants, especially if it's a competitive market, to make it just as easy as possible for the seller. So if there are things the seller wants to leave and doesn't want to handle, and it doesn't really cost you any money, maybe it's a little hassle, it's probably best that you put that in your offer that you will handle it so the seller just doesn't have to worry about it. So those are all kinds of details that you need to gather in your step number 3 after you've studied all these disclosures or while you're studying the disclosures, okay? So now that we've gone through that, there's also an agent walkthrough to take a look at, and those are important, and your buyer's agent will do one of those as well. So let's pull up the Excel spreadsheet because we're gonna now add up the costs. There's several costs of repairs that you need to consider. Once you've added up the costs, then you decide based on the market, do you ask the seller to repair some of these costs, or do you handle them on your own? And this is where your buyer's agent can really help you understand what would be acceptable in this market and what you can ask for and what you need to plan for in your expenses. So for example, in this property, there was $2,200 worth of Section 1 termite work, $1,050 in roof repair work, and also it needs a new roof soon. So I would plan for a whole new roof in 3 to 5 years. Also, there's a $2,000 worth of Section 2 work and additional roof work. Remember that 11E and 11F? Those were roof items that need attention by a roofer. And other minor repairs, there was some GFCI missing and the chimney needed sealing. Electrical had some items, and then this one, there was actually a horizontal foundation crack. There was not an actual report on that, so you're going to need to probably get a report to get an actual bid. In this case, we just put a $10,000 estimate for the repair. So adding that all up, it looks like about $17,250 worth of repairs that you need to pay attention to once you take possession of the house. So keep that in mind when you're writing the offer. Okay, so number 5 step is to finalize the terms of your offer. So your agent is going to prepare for you a market analysis. They're going to come over here, do a search of what appraiser would do so that you have an idea of what the property might appraise for so that you can use it as a starting point. This particular property was a 4-bedroom home, under 2,200 square feet. We're going to look at the last 3 months worth of sales because that's what an appraiser needs to use, the recent market, and within 1 mile of the address. So if we do that, we get several different comparable sales popping up. Not all of them are sold, but let's do a quick summary of what this looks like. And this will help you get a feel for several different factors. The first is, what is the dollar per square foot in this neighborhood? Here's a range. It's running at about $850 a square foot right now. And I don't know where this property particularly was priced at, but that would be a discussion that you have with your agent, right? And also look at the sales prices. For sale prices of homes like this, we've got anywhere from, there's a huge range, probably based on updates. So this is where you and your buyer's agent need to go through the details and figure out what might be the best price for this property, and then figure out how you're going to make an offer. How are you going to be competitive? How do your finances work out? Do you have extra down payment funds to maybe waive the appraisal contingency? Do you have funds to account for the repairs that are necessary? So what is the best number that you can put together to prepare an offer for the seller that accounts for all of those different factors? So those are all the very important steps. And then as you're finalizing that price, you're also going to need to get ready your earnest money deposit. That is typically a 3% money that you would be transferring into the third-party escrow as soon as your contract is accepted. So you need to have that money ready and liquid to move as soon as possible. So 3% of the purchase price, which will be credited towards your full down payment. I have another video specifically about that. So next, you really need to talk up with your agent, of course, and understand these details more. But also download my no-cost offer tips to increase the value of your offer. Those are really important tips of what you can include in your offer. I'll put the link below. And take a look at step 5, then the next in the series about negotiating price. We're going to go into that in more detail. And then also watch my other video that talks more about what to include in an offer. Thanks so much for watching.